razor-sharp wit, impeccable style, Noël Coward was one of Britain's most gifted creative forces. His talent so respected by friends and colleagues, they called him the master. Coward first displayed his distinctive flair and flamboyance as a teenager, writing his first serious play, The Rat Trap, in 1918. He became a huge name in theatre society, and by 1930 was one of the world's highest-paid writers. Over 6 decades, his career spanned acting, composing, writing and directing. Blithe Spirit, Brief Encounter, and the enduring war epic In Which We Serve that Coward co-directed with David Lean and starred in remain to this day films that resonate deeply with the British public. Success took me to her bosom like a maternal boa constrictor, he would say. And he discusses his status as a legend here in our first interview, which coincided with his appearance in Carol Reed's 1959 film, Our Man in Havana.
Mr. Coward, you act very seldom these days. I wonder why you chose to act in Our Man in Havana, this particular part.
Well, principally because Alec Guinness and Sir Carol Reed asked me to. And also I liked the book very much, and I thought it was a very good part, although it's quite a small one.
It is the part of a secret agent, I think.
Yes, Hawthorne.
A curious thought struck me. Some people have fantasies about themselves as engine drivers or princes or dukes. I wonder if you had a fantasy about yourself as a secret agent.
Oh, good heavens, no.
I thought
they lead very dull lives.
You're a very variously endowed person, Mr. Coward. I wonder how you apportion the satisfactions of writing, acting and composing. In short, which of them gives you the most satisfaction?
Well, it's awfully difficult to say, because I enjoy doing what I'm doing. But one of the problems of my life is to make the time for each without sacrificing one to the other. That's why I only play limited seasons when I do play on the stage, and why I only do a film here and there, because that takes me away from something else. So therefore I have to keep it all balanced.
I'm not inviting you to be modest when I ask you this, but I wonder if you have any idea which you're best at.
No, I don't know. I try to be my best at all of them, but it doesn't always work, but sometimes it does.
You're not only a real person, actually composed of flesh and blood, but you're a legend as well. Is it tiresome to be a legend?
No, I haven't found it so. I didn't know that I was all that much, but I suppose I am. No, I don't think it's very tiresome. I rather enjoy it.
Do people expect you to be witty all the time at breakfast, dinner and tea?
I see very few people at breakfast, and so therefore I don't suppose there's any answer to that question. And as for dinner and tea, if they always expect me to be witty, they're out of luck. Sometimes maybe a little joke might slip out, but it's not an essential.
No. Do you get told an awful lot of bad jokes yourself?
Not if I can help it.
And I wonder if you get tired of admiration. You are admired, and I think justly, for your ability in all these various fields. Do you ever get tired of being admired?
Well, I've yet to meet an artist of any sort who gets tired of being admired.
You've been hugely successful in your career. I wonder if success has been the only thing you've been aiming at, or perhaps you've been aiming at something more.
Well, there are varying degrees of success. Success with the public, I've fortunately had a great deal of, and I'm very grateful for. Success with myself is something quite different. That's what I aim for.
And what is success with yourself?
When I feel that I've done something well.
Will you ever retire?
Eventually, to the grave.
Can you tell me some of the things that bore you, Mr. Coward?
You know, really, on the whole, certain types of people bore me, but I'm not very easily bored, because if I see a boar heaving up over the horizon, I run like a stag.
Is there any special method of spotting them?
Oh, yes, boars emanate a sort of aura of boredom, a sort of grey quality. And when they say, "Stop me if you've heard this one," then I know, and I'm out.
There seems to me to be a paradox in your nature as an artist, Mr. Coward. On the one hand, you write plays which seem to me to be extremely cynical, and on the other, you write plays that seem to me to be extremely sentimental. And I wonder if you're aware of this paradox in yourself.
I think there's a paradox in all creative artists. Without wishing for any invidious comparisons, my esteemed colleague, William Shakespeare, was capable of writing very light comedy and very serious tragedy and lyrical romance. I think it all depends on the subject that you happen to choose to write. You must write it truly.
And yet he wasn't, you wouldn't say he was cynical. It seems to me that you are, I mean in your plays, and that one who is good at being cynical is not good at being sentimental.
Yes, well, I don't really think that cynical is a very good word. I don't think I've ever been cynical. I certainly have a strongly developed sense of the ridiculous, and I sometimes laugh rather flippantly at serious problems because I don't consider them all that serious. But that's not being cynical. Not really.
Comic acting was Noël Coward's first love. After his first stage performance, aged 11, he found a mentor in Charles Hawtrey, not the carry-on actor, but a silent movie star and a celebrated actor of the period. Hawtrey was an inspirational figure in Coward's life, as he explains in this interview with Michael McCowan from 1966.
Well, Michael, together we're going to have a little discussion about comedy acting, a fairly comprehensive subject.
Indeed. You came under the influence of the great naturalistic comedian of the time, Charles Hawtrey. You've often said that he's had a tremendous influence on your acting ever since.
Well, he was a perfectly brilliant comedian and one of the most sensitive directors. I honestly think I've learned practically all I know about comedy playing from him, not only from what he actually taught me, but from his example.
Can you give examples? Can you say the kind of thing that you got from him?
Oh, yes. He, he used to watch me very carefully when I was rehearsing, and he never bullied me. I was very precocious, and I think quite a lot of other directors would have said, oh, shut up. But I was eager to learn, and he knew it. And I used to stand at the side of the stage watching him, and he used to teach me things. He taught me how to laugh. I remember him standing over me at rehearsal in front of the whole company and saying, now, boy, you've got to laugh. Now, start with this. Ha, 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 ha. But put your breath right. And he stood over me till I did it. He didn't say, now smile with a bit. Now go, ha, ha, ha. Then he said, now give way. And I went, ha, 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 ha. And that was entirely technical.
You said you've got to be thinking about a great many different things, your mind working on different levels. This is awfully interesting, isn't it? Because people think of it in the wrong way, don't they? They think that you're thinking now this, now that, now the other, but in fact you're thinking about them all simultaneously, aren't you?
At the same time. Always. It must be.
Yes.
Like reflexes in driving a car. It becomes so automatic that you don't, it isn't even conscious thought.
You'd been in America for a time, for quite a long time.
Yes.
Yes. Coming back to the theatre in England, how did it feel after all the
It's very curious.
in America?
I must just preface this by saying that in the old days, before the war, in the 20s and the 30s, whenever I was about to do a new production in England, I always used to go to New York for a fortnight and stay at the Astor Hotel and go to every single play, because the tempo and the wonderful speed and the vitality of the American theatre was far superior to the English. Then, since the war, the theatre has deteriorated, I think, enormously. Now, in England, I think the standard is immensely high today among young actors. The only thing I have to say about that owing to the dearth of playwrights, I mean light comedy playwrights, not good playwrights. There are several fine playwrights in England, but those, it's rather fashionable now to say the day of the well-made play is over. That's nonsense. You might just well say the day of the well-painted picture is over. It's silly. My early days in the theatre and the actor-manager's time, which is certainly going back a bit, I would never go into a theatre belonging to Charles Hawtrey or Geraldine Maurier or George Alexander or Sir Herbert Tree without being spick and span, whatever I was going to play. If I were going to play a dustman, I would have my suit pressed for rehearsals out of respect for the theatre itself, the edifice, the building. You couldn't see a lot of people in denims and blue jeans and dirty old sweaters walking about the stage of the St. James's. I think a slovenly appearance indicates in some way a slovenly mind. I wish I could only explain, and it sounds so almost pompous, that with the decline of manners and the decline of elegance, it is much more difficult for young actors to achieve range. To be a good actor, you must constantly better yourself. If you come from humble beginnings, you must then think, well, obviously I can play Cockney, I can play North Country. Now I must learn how to play proper English, improve my voice so that I've got range, so that I can play Henry VIII one night and the Caretaker the next. That's range is what actors should aim for.
That range that Noel strived to achieve helped him create one of his best-known roles, the Captain E.V. Kinross in Which We Serve. The film also saw a young Richard Attenborough making his big screen debut. Nearly 30 years later, the pair were reunited for a session at the National Film Theatre, with Richard taking on the role of the interviewer.
You have any questions?
Yes. Noel, it is 50 years since you first appeared in front of a movie camera. In Hearts of the World. Yes?
Yes, with Lillian Gish.
Yeah. Directed by D.W. Griffith.
Yes, a talented boy.
I wondered, knowing that the theatre is basically your first love, whether you think in those 50 years, movies have become comparable in stature to the theatre.
I think they've become different in stature, and I don't, honestly, and I've never thought that they were comparable. I think it's something quite different. I learned, when I started doing movies myself, an enormous amount that helped me as an actor. The meticulousness of having to do a movie. You see, on the stage, you can make a little fluff and a merry laugh and get on with it, and nobody notices except somebody who's never seen the play before. And in movies, one fluff and you cut, and I hate that word, cut. I always have. But I really, having been in the theatre since 1910, it's my first love and it will be my last love. I'll always love the theatre a little better, and I know why it is. It's very simple. It's the contact of an audience. And say, I'd rather play a bad matinee at Hull. Incidentally, I'd never played a good matinee. And just do a movie. Though I like doing movies and I enjoy it, it's a completely different approach. But the theatre's my love.
I suppose In Which We Serve is the picture by which you will be always remembered in movies. I, at this date, have no idea how it was evolved. I don't know the circumstances under which you got the idea, and I'm sure people will be very interested to know something of its origin.
It was a very complicated business. It took a year to prepare. There was a very sweet man called Del Giudice, who was had a very, very strong Italian accent. He said, no, it's just fabulous, marvelous, wonderful. So I said, listen, that's not the point. How the rush is looking? And then, of course, my friend here gave a wonderful performance in it. And coming not too far behind, I was fairly good. It was very carefully cast, and I must say, I think I'm very proud of it indeed. It repaid, for many, many years, having known the Navy and come from a naval family, I've been at sea a great deal with the Navy, and I wanted, in a way, to pay a very tiny bit of my debt back for all the wonderful hospitality that I'd received. And without Lord Mountbatten, it would never have got off the floor and onto the screen. He was just taken over combined operations and was working like a dog. And every Sunday I think I told you this, he used to work in the rushes with me so that we did get it accurate. And of course, with his usual extraordinary concentration, he did arrange everything. The Commander-in-Chief Portsmouth lent me 200 real sailors every day for 2 weeks, so that all the drill and everything was accurate and not a lot of actors putting their lanyards in unorthodox places. Or and of course, the net result of having the authentic chaps doing it made it real.
I'd like to tell just one very brief story about In Which We Serve. Towards the end of the film, we were in a Carly float, and we were in a tank in the studios. And because we were all somewhat delicate, the water was heated slightly. We were in this tank for, I think, between 2 and 3 weeks. The smell was something to be wondered at. There was oil on the water, there was sawdust all around the tank, which was going mouldy. It was absolutely awful.
This was remains of us every day, too.
And on our last day, we all used to lower ourselves, holding our noses into the water. But the master, of course, never. Always first in, off the edge, and dived in. Little flat, nevertheless dived in. On this last day, he emerged from underneath the water with oil and filth and dirt streaming off his face and turned to all of us who were waiting to go in and said, "There's dysentery in every ripple." No, what made you choose David Lean?
Well, when I knew that I was embarked on this project, and up until then, I hadn't been profoundly impressed with British films as a whole, and I thought, well, I'd better have a look-see. And so I went to a projection room twice a day for 2 weeks and saw every British film that was available. And out of the credits, I observed that the ones I'd liked, the cutting had been done by somebody called David Lean, and the photography had been done by somebody called Ronald Neame, and the general production had been done by Anthony Havelock Allen. And so I said, all right, let's have a look. And so I asked David Lean to come and see me. And he said, yes, he would do it with pleasure, but he insisted on co-directing. People stiffened, like a Bateman drawing. But I said, oh, please do. Because I knew nothing, apart from having played in The Scoundrel, I knew nothing really about any of the technical side of making a movie. And of course, it was David who directed the picture. I took the actors aside occasionally. But he was a wonderful director. Yes. And later, when I was not anywhere about at all, he did a little number called Brief Encounter, which was one of the most beautifully directed pictures I ever saw. Again, David.
That was the other film I was going to mention. I would think almost anybody here in this theatre who decided to select a dozen of the best British films would certainly include Brief Encounter amongst those. And we often talk about the late 50s dealing with contemporary life in an almost documentary style, in a totally realistic style, whereas in fact your screenplay for Brief Encounter was of a sophistication which was quite new for the cinema.
Yes, I suppose it was. You see, it was based on the play, which I'd played with Darling Gertie, and I've always liked suggestion rather than flat statement. And so I've always, in my best things, written a bit obliquely. And it worked on the screen. I wasn't at all sure that it would, but it did.
Do you, in fact, think that the style of acting, in theatre as well as in films, has changed significantly in the last, say, 40 years, 30, 40 years?
No, I think that, not particularly, no. I think that good acting was always good acting. I believe, though I didn't ever, unfortunately, see him, that Sir Charles Wyndham had a quality of naturalness which was incredibly good and quite unique. It's awfully difficult. I was trained by a master, Charles Hawtrey, in comedy, you see, and comedy playing does vary. I would say playing emotional parts, falling off a lot to playing comedy.
I always remember the advice, or the story of the advice that you gave to a young actress at the end of a dress rehearsal who had stumbled through, and at the end, the master had given notes and so on, and this young actress came up to him at the end and said, "Tomorrow, Mr. Coward, we're going to open. It's going to mean a tremendous amount to me. There must be, surely, some slogan, some motto, something which inspires you in all your work, which shows in the standard of work that you've always done, that you write in makeup across your mirror. Could you possibly tell me what it is?" And the master said, "I think, get on, say your lines, and get off without crashing into the furniture." Is that correct?
Endlessly quotable, Coward was always comfortable talking about his many talents. "I love criticism," he said, "just so long as it's unqualified praise." When once asked if he tired of having to answer the same old questions about himself, Coward replied, "Not at all. I am fascinated by the subject." His writing skills were the subject of this next interview, which comes from a programme recorded in 1969.
When did you first become aware of your own ability not only to act, which obviously led you into the theatre, but in fact to write plays?
Well, I used to write plays when I was about 10 or 11 or 12. I suppose it was an absolute gift, because I left school when I was 9 to go into ballet school. And then I went on the stage when I was 10, so I didn't have any formal education, which of course left me free to educate myself.
And what steps did you take to educate yourself as a writer, that is theatrically?
Read. I belonged to the Battersea Park Public not Laboratory, but I say library. Freudian slip. And I read and read and read. Everything I could lay my hands on.
What books? I mean, what particular authors? I've never known which particular
Well, the first one was a lady called E. Nesbit, who wrote books for children, and Saki. Saki was another of my inspirations, and up to a point, Dickens. I'd read most of Dickens by the time I was 16 or 17, I think.
In any case, you seem to be able to write with great facility and ease. This is a tremendous gift, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
And nothing but a gift, really.
Nothing but a gift.
As if given you.
No, you can't work on that. That is sheer luck. The danger of too much of that facility is that you write, and it's done. And sometimes it's not quite good enough. Then I very seldom do revise. I think perhaps I should have revised sometimes more than I have. But it's awfully hard to go back when you think you've done it, and it's lovely, and then it isn't.
As you do write so easily, do you have your plays, as it were, already made in your head, that it's almost a matter of a physical labor of writing them down?
They're in my mind for a long time beforehand. And they, generally before going to sleep at night. They come back, if it's a good idea, it comes back into my mind and I get a little more until the moment comes to start writing it. But there have been exceptions. Hay Fever was conceived on a Friday and finished on the Monday. And it's been one of the most successful I ever did, and I didn't even think about it beforehand. But that's an exception.
When you were writing your first plays in the 1920s, it was always felt you spoke with the authentic voice of the 1920s, and then rightly the authentic voice of the 1930s. Do you feel that your voice is less authentic than it was?
I think there's been rather a lot of nonsense talked about the 20s, the gay, bright young things and all that nonsense. They were a very minor part of the 20s. If I were writing a play about the 50s, which I might conceivably do, or the 60s, I think I would have automatically write in that idiom. Each decade carries with it its own changes. I think if you're alert, you fall in with the changes.
Are you going to write a new play, or are you writing one at the moment?
I'm not writing one at the moment, but I probably shall if the bell rings.
You don't feel any particular inclination to just
well,
knock off a bit?
with me, no. I always feel the inclination, providing I get if I get a good idea. If suddenly something can start me off, I'll probably fly to the desk.
Ill health meant that no new play could be written after that interview. Coward did, however, make one last screen appearance in 1969, playing Mr. Bridger in The Italian Job. Michael Caine described the experience as a bit like acting with God, actually. The next 12 months saw Coward knighted, elected a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, and presented with a Tony Lifetime Achievement Award. On the 29th of May, 1973, Noël Coward died at his home in Jamaica. In London, the lights went out in Theatreland to mark the passing of a great writer and a legend. Today, Noël Coward is remembered for his personality, his wit, his style, and for his huge and hugely influential body of work. Coward once said, "Thousands of people have talent. I might as well congratulate you for having eyes in your head. The one and only thing that counts is, do you have staying power?" And in his case, the answer is very definitely yes.